many reasons why building in deep tech for climate is difficult. You cannot really apply the proven lean startup approach in climate tech or climate deep tech. I guess a good proxy is like if you get out of that meeting and you feel either smarter or happier or both, usually that's a good sign. How much does it cost to build a building so big? How much time is it going to take? You can eliminate ideas like that because they look great on a small scale, but then when you extrapolate the numbers, it's just insane and it's never going to work.
Welcome back to Clean Techies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. I'm Somil.
And I'm Silas. Each week, we publish the secrets to success from investors, founders, operators, and experts in climate tech around the world. Building a startup is hard. Building a climate tech startup is even harder. But we make it a little bit easier.
We put a lot of effort into these shows, so we hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and let us know who you think we should have on next.
With that, let's get into today's episode.
Hey there. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Clean Techies with Benjamin Tincq from Marble. Really great episode. You're hearing this because you are a free subscriber. If you'd like to get the full discussion with Ben, you can become a paid member today by going to cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and choosing any paid membership. By getting a paid membership, you get to hear the entirety of this episode as well as others and get access to our community and our monthly show and a whole bunch of other benefits that we can't even mention here. So if you'd like to get the full experience, go to cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe and become a paid member today. Today, we are speaking with Ben Tincq, the co-founder of Marble. They are a venture studio based out of Paris. If you're unfamiliar, a venture studio launches companies, plural. Rather than just investing in them or building a single company, they identify areas of interest and then find the right people to build those companies out. They also go out and find the right resources so that those companies have a higher chance of success. They were the first climate-specific studio that I had heard about, and I've been a fan of their work for quite some time. In today's conversation, we discuss Benjamin's background and how he and Johnny founded Marble, as well as how they fundraised for it. We also discussed at length the process of how they identify an area to work in or to build in, how they find a founder to be their initial founder in residence, and then how they grow the company and spin it out fully. In that section, we also spent quite a lot of time talking about what to look for in a co-founder, which I think is a very valuable part of the discussion that many people should find interesting. He also gives us a broad view of the 4 key things to keep in mind when you are building in deep tech. I won't spoil it, but they're very good. Then we discuss a broader methodology of finding the best ideas to work on. He says there's no science to it, but he does give a number of very good tips. And then finally, he then gives us a peek at the areas they are currently seeking to launch new companies in and why. This includes clean cooling and geothermal, among others. And then we wrap up with a discussion about building without reliance on policy. It's a great episode, and we really hope you enjoy it as much as we did to make it. And big shout out to our sponsors, Goodwin Law, for helping to make this show possible. All right, now enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to the show, Ben. Super excited to have you. How are things today for you?
Going great.
That's good to hear. This has been, for the listeners, this has been a long time coming. We've been trying to book this for a while, and Ben is a busy man, so we're finally glad to have it happening. I guess, give us just a quick intro on yourself. Like, what's your background, and kind of give us the summary of from where you started and how you ended up helping found and run Marble.
Thanks, Silas, and thank you so much for having me on the pod. It's a pleasure. So how did I get to Marble? So, I had quite a non-linear journey into climate tech and to founding Marble. My background is in engineering initially, so I studied engineering, telecommunications specifically. Then I worked in tech consulting. The firm where I was working happened to start a clean tech offer in 2009, around the time of the Copenhagen Climate Conference. So I worked in that team for a year and a half, and then they shelved that offer because the clean tech bubble kind of popped and they decided to reallocate activities elsewhere. So I ended up working on something else for a few more years. I left consulting, ended up starting an event and consulting company, which was working in sharing economy space. So sharing platforms, open source makers, Fab Labs, this kind of thing. And then around the time of the Paris Climate Conference, we ended up working on a climate tech solutions incubator. And I left that project basically feeling a bit disappointed by the outcome of that particular project. I wanted to go more into like the deep tech, hard tech science for climate, because some of the stuff we were working on were not high potential enough, let's say. So I ended up starting another research company to really connect more with the deep tech and scientific innovation ecosystem in climate specifically. It was meant to be a temporary company, really the time to network and build a knowledge base and start to figure out what would be the next step. And after 3 years working in this company, doing a couple investment in a few companies, in fusion, in biotech, and so on, I ended up spending a year working with a fusion company that I helped them to raise their first round. And at that time, I thought, okay, should I basically find a CTO, CSO, and launch one climate tech company myself? Or should I build more like a platform or company to help others build? And I think it was my choice in the end. So I started looking for a co-founder. And after talking to, as you know, like dozens of people, which is like the kind of thing you do when you're looking for someone to start a new company with, I met Johnny, my co-founder, and we started Marble in 2020, 2021.
How did you determine that Johnny was the right person to do this with? Because finding a co-founder, we'll talk more about it later, but that's a big leap, right? It's basically like a marriage. You gotta trust that person for the long haul.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a number of things. I think you always have like, first of all, this one thing that's difficult to objectivize at the beginning, which is just magic when you meet someone. You have a good fit. You have a lot of ideas together. The conversation flows. You're very complementary. You have a good time. And I guess a good proxy is like if you get out of that meeting and you feel either smarter or happier or both, usually that's a good sign. And I love that feeling. And I guess we had that from the beginning. And then it's just like the productivity of two people working together. And if productivity massively increase when you're working together, it's also a good sign. And that was definitely the case here.
You know that feeling when you meet someone who shares your vision for the future? It just clicks, like two peas in a pod. Well, that's exactly how we felt when we met Goodwin, who we are proud to have as our sponsor.
Being the first major law firm to set up a climate-specific startup and venture practice makes them exactly the kind of partner we are excited to work with. They realize that there are a plethora of challenges to building climate tech startups, and that's why they have built an entire suite of resources for founders, investors, and entrepreneurs in the space. They even offer several tailored pricing methods. And guess what? It doesn't matter where you are listening to this. Goodwin is a global law firm that you can trust to be your partner through it all, from incorporation to exit. They've got you covered.
Go to goodwinlaw.com and tell them CleanTechie sent you to get exclusive access to startup resources. All right, back to the show.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate the context. And I guess one thing I want to offer the listeners too is part of the reason I'm super excited for this conversation today is when I got interested in ClimateTech back after my kind of entrance into renewables, I also wanted to start a studio of sorts to build ventures because I love the idea of making it a business to build businesses rather than just having one. I don't think that's the end up going, but that was kind of my original interest in this space. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the first studio we're having on the pod, so this is pretty special for me. But I guess let's get into a little bit more detail about starting Marble. Give us kind of the founding story there and fill us in on the gaps and some of the challenges along the way.
Yeah, so I guess why did we start Marble and why did we end up creating a studio? There's a number of reasons. I think the first reason is what we didn't want to do, basically. So we did not want to create one startup because we didn't feel we could, get excited for a single topic, a single technology for 10 years and do only that. We really wanted to have a broad scope in climate tech. We didn't want to start a fund because you can do a lot of great things running a fund, but I guess we were scared we would be a bit too hands-off. And also, there's so much capital that was coming online to invest in climate tech in 2020, 2021. We didn't really feel we would love to compete for deal flow at the early stage. And we didn't want to build an accelerator either because, the business model of an accelerator, it's difficult. I think it can be valuable, but it's difficult to fund and to run. We felt there was a lot of value in creating our own deal flow and net new companies that others could invest in and follow on. So we really love that. And I guess a central piece of the thesis is that today the scarcity is no longer capital and it's no longer talent. There's so many talented people who want to work in climate tech. I'm sure you see that every day. But we felt an interesting problem to work on was how do you match the best people with the most ambitious and the most interesting problem they could possibly be working on and solving. And we really love the idea of designing a program like a studio around this talent opportunity matching, and it was the essential piece of the thesis. And we wanted to do something really international focused, global ambition, but like based in Europe, because that's where we happen to be and where we could build a team. And yeah, that was pretty much the backstory. We started in end of 2020, raised the first check to launch the vehicle in 2021 and onboarded the first founders in the fall of 2021.
Yeah. So I guess just for people who are maybe unfamiliar, can you just walk us through the mechanics of how Marble actually works?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a venture studio. So it means it's a company which creates companies. We are not looking for existing teams and existing companies in which to invest. We co-create new companies. And the way we do that is basically by building, so it starts by building a thesis, a conviction on a particular opportunity area or particular sector. So it can be things like sustainable aviation fuels, direct air capture, geothermal, enteric methane, wastewater, like a lot of different topics. So we do a little bit of initial research on that area to build conviction that yes, it's a massive climate problem, massive market. There's enough technical white space to build something differentiated and interesting that can move the needle in that space. And we can see the possibility of accessing the right kind of talent to become the founders in residence for that area. Once we've done that, then we look for usually a first founder in residence, usually someone very technical with deep domain expertise in that space, to join us for a 1 year long program during which we look at a lot of different technologies, solutions, approaches to crack that particular problem. And once we found something interesting, then we build the company together with them. We look for the right co-founders for them to build an initial team. We work on their technical and commercial roadmap. And at the end of the journey, we spin out that project into a new company and we become the first backers of that company. We've done the full cycle 6 times so far. So we've created 6 companies already, and we have 5 to 10 more in the pipeline for the next 10 to 18 months approximately.
So how much time do you spend on identifying the areas to work on? And is that kind of an ongoing thing, or you kind of take some time and look at the climate problems and then say, here are the categories? And then once you've done that, how much time do you spend finding that kind of initial founder in residence?
Yeah, it's very variable, but so we do that, to your first question, we do that on an ongoing basis. It's not like we have a research season and a sourcing season. It's always kind of in parallel. I would say on average to build conviction on an area is like 2 months, 3 months, sometimes a bit shorter, sometimes a bit longer. And to find a great founder to work on an area, well, sometimes it's very fast because, luck or network, and it happens in a month or 2 months. Sometimes it takes us like a year to find the right person. So it's very, very variable. What we did, we iterated on the exact format of the cohort and when we have the intake dates. Today we have cohorts every 3 to 4 months. That way we have enough dates where we can onboard someone that we found on the area, and so that we're not stuck with, having only one date per year, for instance.
And then just to back up and recap it, you said that when you're identifying an area, the core piece that matters to you is the climate impact plus the fact that there's white space and not a lot has been done already in that space, at least publicly.
Yeah, so the problem needs to represent at least 1% of the climate problem to solve, basically. Which means if it's emissions reduction or carbon removal, it's about 0.5 gigaton per year worth of problem. If it's adaptation, we do a bit less in adaptation, but we also work a bit on adaptation. The metrics are a little more complicated, but basically it would be something that can impact like 100 million people and help them adapt, or something that could avoid 1% of the cost of climate change, for instance. That could be good metrics. So that's the impact metrics. Then we're looking at something where there are markets which are at least 10 billion worth to sustain the level of risk we would take in that area. And then we do not define in advance which specific technology we will build, but more, are there enough tech white space and ideation space to explore and find a new solution? Or is everything already, crowded, or there's already like something really, really promising on the horizon that we wouldn't be able to meet? Obviously, it's the result of a few months' work. It's not a definitive answer. And then sometimes we realize we were right, sometimes we realize we were wrong, and we pivot.
And can you talk about finding that initial founder in residence? Like, give us maybe an example of one of the areas you're looking on right now. So if people are listening and they think they're a fit, they can reach out. Like, how do you've got the space, and then how do you determine that this is the right person to do that?
Yeah. So usually when you research an area, we then define, a number of like 2, 3, 4 profile archetypes which are people who have like specific skill set or come from specific companies or backgrounds. I mean, not specific companies, more specific company types. So it can be, a typical mechanical engineering discipline or chemical engineer, or it can be someone who's working in geothermal project development, for instance. And we look for people like this. So we do some outbound approach to directly approach people. And also we do a lot of content and events and things that can generate inbound applications. But we try to cast a relatively wide net, because you need to find someone who has relevant expertise, but also has intrinsic motivation to be a founder, because a lot of cases, those are like passive candidates. Some of them don't even know yet they want to be a founder, or they know they want to become a founder, but they're early in their journey because they don't yet have a team, they don't yet have a co-founder. So we really catch them very early in that journey. And we need to believe in their founder potential. So having that intersection is non-trivial, but so we cast a relatively wide net, but focused enough.
ClimateTech founders are taking on a huge challenge. Not only do they need to know how to build a startup, but they also need to deal with hardware, have a strong handle on climate policy, know how to fundraise from diverse investor types. It's a lot.
That's why we made Clean Techies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. In addition to our jobs, we devote 20 hours a week to producing this podcast for you. This way you can learn from the people who have walked the path before you, learn from their mistakes, and gain insights on navigating this complex journey. If this mission resonates with you, we are asking for your help. It takes a lot of effort and it's not free.
If you are already a subscriber and want to help, start supporting us today by going to Substack and clicking Upgrade to Paid. Thanks for helping all the climate tech entrepreneurs like you.
How frequently do you find people who want to be a founder and who eventually, maybe once you kind of pitch them an idea, they're interested in it, but you're kind of concerned that, maybe they wanted to start their own company. How many founder types are willing to go start something in an area where you guys have come up with the idea and it's not necessarily their idea? Or do those things typically overlap where they've already been looking in that space and they say, wow, here's the opportunity for me with all the resources?
Yeah. I mean, 99% of the people we speak with are not a fit for what we're offering, or more likely we're not a fit for what they're looking for. So it's a very, very small slice we're looking for. But yeah, it happens very frequently. And you have people like absolutely amazing we meet, but just the area where they want to create a company is not exactly where we want to focus, which is also why we're trying to remain flexible. And sometimes we can reprioritize an area, or like build quickly a conviction on something that was, let's say, on our radar, but on which we hadn't spent time on before, because we meet someone so incredible that we want to look whether it's interesting. So the model is flexible. It's not only exclusively the things on which we spent 3 to 6 months researching. Yeah. It can depend.
And just out of curiosity, again, this is partially stemming from the fact I'm just really fascinated by this entire model, is how often are the founders pretty early in their career versus relatively late and they've done a lot of things?
That's an excellent question. And I'm not sure if I will help you, but basically today I think we have the full spectrum, meaning we have people who come from just after their fresh PhD graduates who came in and became a CTO, co-founder of companies we created. Like our very first founder in residence, Steven, CTO of Earlium, really came to us just after this. And then we have, not first founders, but co-founder is CEO for one of our companies, Vema, Geologic Hydrogen, who's in his 60s, like very experienced geologist and entrepreneur who was like the perfect co-founder for Florian. So we have really a full spectrum. But first founders, I would say they tend to be more early career to mid-career. We don't have like extremely senior people coming as first founder usually.
So with that, then, I assume that there's a good number of the early stage, or the first founders, let's call them, that have somewhat of a commercial mindset, but maybe not necessarily as much experience going through that. It sounds like you're not so worried about them having that because you can guide them, and also you can bring in co-founders who have that commercial mindset later on. Is there a reason why you're not so concerned? Like, why is it just more that they need to be technically curious and technically competent at the early stages, and then once they've got that figured out, then you can guide them on the commercial track? Like, how does that work?
I mean, again, there's a lot of different cases. It's not like one standard one. I would say we mostly appeal to first-time founders, at least for the first founders in residence who come in at the beginning to explore an area. I think we could appeal to like second-time founder or like experienced operator as co-founders, and that has happened several times already. But first founder, like the very first who come, are usually first founders, and yes, they they are domain specialists or technical specialists, and some of them are more educated about venture when they start, but a lot of them really it's like their first journey into startups. They're very curious, and I guess what we look is how fast they're learning and how fast they're progressing. And when they're in program, it's something that we always look is, the learning curve, and is their learning curve accelerating over time. And for some individuals, it's really like super impressive and mind blowing. Others are stalling, and that's where maybe sometimes we make choices.
Yeah, I'm just so fascinated by this whole thing because being in talent, like especially the founder role, right? If somebody, there's just different motives, right? And people go through kind of this arc of life that also affects their decision-making process. They might have been really interested in high risk early, but now they've got a family and they're not so interested in that. So it's just really fascinating to me to like try to apply these different layers of filtering to get the right people in the role. But sorry, you had a comment.
And you have people who tell you, I really want to do this now because I know that now is the right time for me, because maybe in 5 years it will be much more difficult for me to afford it, or like 5 years ago I couldn't. So people are sometimes intrinsically motivated because of that, for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. No, this is really good. So I guess maybe kind of zooming out again, what would you say is your high level vision for what impact you want to have with Marble in the long run, 10, 15, 20 years from now?
I guess like the very, very high level ambition is we want to ideally impact at least 1% of the climate problem, which is why every bet we take needs to have a chance to address it, because, it's venture, it's very risky. Most of these companies won't likely succeed. So each of them need to have the potential to address that. So that's for the impact thesis. Then for Marble and where we want it to be, I guess right now, because we're also a startup ourselves, in a sense, we are really laser focused on proving the model and proving that the model works. And so maximizing the success of our first companies and nailing down, like perfecting the studio model, then raising another vehicle to do maybe, another batch of company from 2026 onwards. Right now, we're funded to do about 20 companies and we want to do more after that. But then, there's a possibility that we might, expand the platform in other horizon, which might be, project development, which might be going more earlier stage, and founding science, which might be going later stage, and raising a fund at some point. We haven't made any decisions here. We really want to perfect the studio model first, but there's a lot of things we could do.
One thing you touched on, I forgot to ask already, is I guess, can you talk briefly about how you go about or went about the fundraising for this? Was it just, similar to raising for a startup, or was it similar to raising for more of a fun kind of angle? Obviously, the mechanism is different, but how did you raise money? Who did you raise money from, if you're able to talk about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of between raising for a startup and raising for a fund. So we are not a fund. We are just a limited company. We raise from investors who are mostly high net worth individuals and family offices who care about climate, deep tech, but also, want to make a return. We have about half of the capital coming from Europe and half from the US, approximately. Our biggest investor is the Grantham Foundation, but there's a few more. And it's a long journey, like for every startup and fundraise. But the thing is, we had to find people who believed in the mission, in climate, who understood deep tech and like kind of understood the studio model. And I guess that was a narrow Venn diagram, but in the end, we're quite happy with the outcome.
And just reflecting on that, what do you think were the core reasons why, in the end, these organizations, these individuals chose to bet on YouTube?
I think they thought the mission made sense. I think they thought the combination of skill set and experience we brought together with Johnny made sense. So I was working in climate and clean tech. I brought the domain expertise. I had made a few investments before. Johnny was coming also from the entrepreneurial track, had built a software company in the UK, and then he worked to lead the program for Entrepreneur First in Paris, which is another program, cohort-based venture builder. It was the right mix of expertise, and or maybe just it was 2021 and we were lucky because everyone was investing and we just came at the right time. So that was maybe a luck factor. There's always a factor of luck that it's important to acknowledge. But I think we're persistent, and apparently we are good enough for people to trust us, and let's hope they were right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I figured it might have been something with the fact that you guys have technical backgrounds, because I can assume if it was just, if you guys had only done software stuff or something like that, it might be a little bit more challenging for you to be able to, suss out the right people and the right idea. So anyways, I appreciate that. I know I didn't plan to ask you that, so I appreciate you indulging me.
Well, The thing is, so Johnny has a business background. I have an engineering background, but neither in chemistry nor in biology. I guess I'm very curious, but we were really cautious to build a credible scientific team and technical team in the studio. So we have PhDs and amateur scientists in our team working with the founder. So that's a key of the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's transition to, I guess, a little bit more, let's call it trends topics, so we can get into some more longer discussions here. Within building in deep tech, I'm always very curious, and a lot of founders ask, what are the core challenges or things that they just need to be aware of when they're building anything in deep tech? Let's kind of keep it broad for now.
Where do I start? So let's start at the early stage. I mean, there's many reasons why building in deep tech for climate is difficult, but one of the reasons is that you cannot really apply the proven lean startup approach in climate tech or climate deep tech, because every cycle, every loop is very expensive. You have to build physical hardware or wetware. You have to spend time in R&D, technical development. So it's very costly cycles. So you need to find ways to iterate while reducing your iteration cost at the beginning. So that's why doing as much work as you can on paper without building anything early on to validate as many hypotheses you can before actually spending too much time in development is like a key thing we're working on. So that means validating your market, talking to a lot of customers, doing a lot of customer development as much as you can, trying to validate as many things as you can on your techno-economic model. So which means it's a fancy word to say basically a sophisticated spreadsheet model of your process, your technology, and the different parameters from the cost of electricity to the cost of hydrogen to how much you're going to sell your product, your unit economics, et cetera, and trying to stress test that model by talking with people who have access to more precise data that they use and so on and so on. So trying to validate as much thing as possible to define whether it's actually worth a shot to try building that process or that technology or not. So that's a key part to do at the beginning. Then I think later stage, everything takes longer. Obviously, every milestone takes longer. So it's really important, because the go-to-market of deep tech companies is a bit longer, to break down what are the right milestones, both commercial, technical, traction, that can unlock enough value and lower risk enough so that the follow-on investor will be able to come on board. Because it's not like in SaaS and software where you can expect that, in 2 or 3 years, I will have enough annual recurring revenue so that I will be able to raise my series and so on. You need to show that you're decreasing risk and lowering value over time. So a big piece we also are working on with the founders while they're in program is before the company even spin out from the program, we try to build the first roadmap of their progress at least until Series A. So obviously things will move, because you have any plan doesn't survive the contact with reality, but at least they have a first blueprint of how they should think about how to sequence their technical development and their commercial development. So that's really key. And then later stage, we're not yet to that point with our companies, but we know already that for those, and most of them actually, will have to build facilities, factories, large-scale processes. When you need to raise funds and you to develop projects for these large-scale facilities, these first-of-a-kind plants and nth-of-a-kind plants, is very difficult because you cannot use venture capital to do that. It's too costly as a type of financing. So there's a lot of conversations ongoing about, how you can stack different types of capital, grant, debt, project finance, and so on to build your first plans, secure the right of take agreement to de-risk enough for commercial debt to come in and so on. So again, our companies are not yet at that stage, but we already anticipate we'll have to help them solve those problems and already thinking about what kind of resource and team we should have in place to help them through that stage.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how you guys work on solving those later stage problems, because I assume that you've built a network of very deep, let's call it scientific talent on the early stage to help de-risk these things, and it's a very different network as you get to those next levels. But I assume you guys are going to do it well because you've already understood the importance of the community in that angle. So you'll do it well on the next levels, and then it will really, really help you to have essentially an edge on any other company in the space. And people might wish that they had built with Marble in the beginning. Okay, so I want to try to recap this and make sure I've got it right. So you're suggesting that the core pieces are first to reduce the time and cost of iteration. So you can iterate faster because it's deep tech, it's hardware, it's not software, it's much harder to do. So that's the first piece. Second piece was understanding the right milestone so that you know what you're aiming for. Because it's not the same with DeepTech compared to software, for example. And then thirdly, understanding and getting the right resources for the later stage when it comes to building facilities and understanding project finance or debt facilities, correct? Those are the three like main areas of challenges that you'd like to point out.
It's three big ones. Yeah. I mean, the fourth one I would add is obviously like the team and the co-founder, but we've already talked about that before. It's another like super critical thing we focus on, obviously.
I guess one thing I'd like to ask you then, since you have so much experience with that team and co-founder aspect, maybe we can jump into this now, is what are, for people who aren't building inside of Marble, right? Share a little bit of your secret sauce here. What are the core things that matter as the original founder or maybe the early team when they're looking for another co-founder or early team member to join them? Like what really matters to ensure that's going to be success? Are there certain kind of types of people that you need to have a really good team? You need to have a technical person, you need to have a commercial person. Like what is your advice there?
Yeah, so it's even more difficult to find co-founders to find the first founder, because not only you need to find the right mix of skill set, expertise, background, and so on, and motivation and founder potential, but you also need to have the personal fit and the human fit and the location fit also to build a company, obviously. But yeah, things to look for in your co-founder. I mean, obviously, it's very, very known, but like just the right complementary of expertise, of experience. You want to make sure you cover with your co-founders, whether you're 2 or 3, the most important risks that the company is going to face in its first 18 months, let's say, like until 12, 18 months, until your next fundraising cycle. So the core technical risk and the core commercial risk, someone needs to be in charge of that in your co-founding team. Sometimes you can complement that with the right advisors and first hires as well. So sometimes when we put together a team, it's always like trying to find out, okay, what kind of risks and core area of the projects should we cover with the co-founding team, and what can be addressed by, let's say, a very experienced first hire or a key advisor, for instance. But in general...
Hey there. This is the end of the free preview of this episode with Benjamin. If you'd like to hear the rest of our discussion about whether or not a co-founder should be an industry insider or outsider, how to find the best ideas to work on, how a founder should think about policy, what areas they are currently building in, and his answers to the quick hits edition and section of the show, become a paid subscriber today to get the full and uninterrupted version of the show, along with all the other benefits of being a paid subscriber, including our community and monthly show. Just go to cleantechies.substack.com/subscribe today and choose any paid membership. We hope to see you in the full version. Thanks so much for listening.